And welcome to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
And my name is Mick, and I am also an alcoholic, and we are both serving as your secretary today. Please join us in a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside these meetings.
And Marianne is going to read the preamble for us.
And then I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. My glasses. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Marianne. And a very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous.
The chat is now disabled to the end of the meeting, except for the meeting host. If you feel the meeting security is at risk at any time during the meeting, please private message one of the co-hosts so that they can check it out.
And that's it, guys. As you know, today is Saturday. It's our old timers meeting. So today we have Jane from Hawaii coming to speak for us. And Jane, you got 45 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever suits you. There'll be nobody timing you, so you do your thing, girl. And it was lovely to meet you in Vancouver.
Lovely to meet you too, Mossy. That was wonderful. Aloha, my name is Jane and I am an alcoholic, and TYG Online is my home group. And I'm also an addict and recovering addict. So if I need to be honest on both accounts with that, because that's what got me started. I'm so privileged to be here. And I don't know if you guys know that your identification number ends with 808. This must be why you have such a connection to Hawaii, because that is the area code for Hawaii. So I love it. When I key it in and I put 808, it's like, yeah, we've got a little Hawaiian connection here. So mahalo for that. And what a great way to start the day. The good thing is that I'm nervous. And when I'm nervous, I actually am more likely to tell the truth than if I'm not nervous. If I'm not nervous, there's usually going to be a story and an agenda. And so I'm nervous. So I'm going to take a few minutes and take a deep breath. And I like to say the third step prayer to get me centered. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And just say, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Amen. And thank you. That really helps. Let's see. Start at the beginning. I was born and raised part of the time on the mainland of in Arizona, and we moved to Hawaii when I was 12, and that's where the other thing started. But I believe I had the alcoholic thinking well before I took the first drink. That's those feelings of insecurity, of not sure of myself. That was from early on, and instances happened as I was a kid that helped propel that. Um, just just that just happened, and so I was unsure of myself, and I was fourth out of five children, and one thing was I was named fourth out of five girls, and I was the one that was named after my father, and one of my sisters used to call me Junior, and big sisters, that's what they do, but you know Junior, it really stuck that I was supposed to be the boy, but but it was me, and so I I thought I was a disappointment to my parents early on, and and found out later through other stuff that wasn't true, but that's what my monkey mind told me. And with other issues that happened, my monkey mind told me that I was wrong in lots of ways, and and that was the way it was for me as a kid. Then we moved to Hawaii, which I thought moving to Hawaii was just the best thing that could have happened in my life. On the mainland, I was probably headed towards this um, towards this alcohol and drugs a lot sooner, and probably towards lots of destruction sooner. That's just the way it was looking. But came to Hawaii. We moved because my dad was the ranch manager. He was the ranch manager of prestigious ranches here in Hawaii, and and they are some of the largest in the world. And he was the ranch manager of those. Um, so I used that, as to my advantage, that I could kind of wiggle around and do things wrong, and people wouldn't arrest me, or wouldn't wouldn't arrest me because I was doing things wrong. But, don't you know who my dad is? It's a small community over here. And so I was able to get away with that for a few years, and I did. Um, but I was a white kid in a brown environment, and that was a little uncomfortable, but yet comfortable. I found my people. I found my people when I found my people here in Hawaii. And then secondly, I found my people when I started drinking. And I was about 12 when I took my first drink. And by the time I was 15, I had crossed over that, whatever that line is, that I was then going into blackouts. And so that was the way. And I was a blackout drinker, not all the time, but I was a blackout drinker from that time to the time I stopped when I was almost 31. That's when I took a drink. At that point, you never knew what was going to happen. I could stop at 2 drinks, or I could go to oblivion. And if I stopped at 2 drinks, I was really fighting to control that. I was really, really fighting to control that. You better look under the table because my knuckles were white. I was grabbing onto the table to try to not drink anymore, because at that point I needed the next drink. I had taken those first 2 drinks, and I was going to be off to the races. And sometimes I stopped and sometimes I didn't. Um, I tell people I'm grateful that I don't have a child that's 15 years younger than me. I've come out of blackouts and in compromising positions, and there's there very likely could be a child sitting next to me, or an adult sitting next to me that's 15 years younger, and I know that today that that's God. I used to think that I was, just lucky or whatever, but I am lucky, but that's God, that's God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. But those drinking, that was really fun. I lived in Hana, which is a very small town on the east end of Maui at that time. I went to a boarding school because the schools in our neighborhood weren't very good, and it was 2 hours to the nearest better school. So I went to a boarding school and lived out of the house from when I was 15, and I'm so grateful. That was so fun, not having parental guidance at 15, 16, 17. It was great. So what I had was the guidance of school counselors, or tried to, um, but mostly it was the guidance of my 15, 16, 17-year-old friends. And we drank and used, and we did lots of mushrooms, which were out in that pasture right next to us. So that was just a lot of fun. Um, and and just other things. Whatever substance would take me away, I would do that. I have some others that I didn't try at all. I didn't like anything that amped me up. I like things that drugged me out. I'm ampy enough. I don't need to go any higher than that. Um, so that got me through high school, and I'm really grateful for that. Um, High school in Maui was a lot of fun in the 70s. And the 70s were, the 70s on Maui were like the 60s other places. Hawaii was a little slower with the development, but that's what the drugs and alcohol were around everywhere and easy to use. Um, let's see, any of those. No, that's just pretty much it. That's, drinking and using was part of our environment. We had the age of 18 was our legal age to drink. Of course, I started well before then, so but when I got to 18, it was fun. Um, but then I went to the mainland for college, and at the mainland it was 21. I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Going back and going back to drinking under the table and drinking when I'm not supposed to be. But I was drinking and using. Same thing through college. Um, I was able to stay sober for long periods of time. Well, let's say a month or two. I was able to stay sober because I was in sports, and I didn't drink during the season, but I was not happy. You know, I would work out a whole heck of a lot more, and I got really skinny. Um, but I was able to do sports during that time, and that was my outlet. Um, that continued to after college, and just continued on until my drinking stopped. At one point, I joined karate when I came home, and we used to, people talk about getting kicked out of bars. Well, we used to get kicked out of parking lots because we would after our karate class, we would sit in the parking lot of wherever it was. Usually it was 7-Eleven, and we would be drinking and then picking fights with people who walked into 7-Eleven to go get something to eat or drink, and we'd be picking fights with them, and then we got kicked out of the parking lot. Poor us, we got kicked out of the parking lot. Didn't have anything to do with us threatening to beat somebody up. Um, and then we got kicked out of the church parking lots that we were, doing karate in, and then we got kicked out of other places. But we still stayed in the parking lot, and I don't know why we just kept moving around, but we did. Drinking and using was part of my story, and it was definitely it was ingrained in me then. Anything to get me out of self. Um, and exercise included that. Exercise was included. I got down. I'm you know I'm 6'5", 6", and I got down to about. I remember at one point reading the scale and it was set 104. I'm not that tiny, you know, and exercise and drugs and alcohol did for me what I could not do for myself. It took me out of self, and for that I am really, really grateful for that gift that it gave me until it stopped working. And I turned 30, and on my 30th birthday, I was down at the usual bar that I hung out with. It was a jazz. I mean, it was a jazz club, and I used to hang out down there, and I was trying to pick up this guy to buy me more drinks, and then all of a sudden, the I was telling him, oh yeah, the story. Do you come down here very often? No, not at all. Do I do you what do you do on the weekends? It's like, oh, nothing. I really don't come out very often. And then the band leader is like, hey, Jane, it's your birthday, come on up. I was like, well, that kind of blew that. When you know the band members personally, you've been there a whole hell of a lot. And calls me up and sings my birthday song to me. And I looked around and I thought, I don't want to be here next year. I don't want to be here doing the same thing with these, same people. These are people I came down there with friends, but they weren't, friends they were friends that drank like me and used like me. And I didn't want to be there again. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, but I didn't know that. But that was my first inkling that there was something wrong. I was 30 and I didn't have any kids. I wasn't in a significant relationship. And I'm comparing myself to my sisters at this time, and didn't own a home, didn't have a home. Well, I did have a home, but it was right on the one of the busiest streets in Honolulu. And people used to ask me where I was calling from because when you could hear me on the phone, you could hear all the traffic going by, and it sounded like I was in the middle of the street. And actually, that was my home, and it was on King Street, and I was never homeless, but that was as close as I got. It was pretty dank, and I'm grateful I'm not there anymore either. After that, those moments of clarity came throughout the year. I had started seeing a therapist, and after a while, I thought, there's something happened with her, and I thought I wanted to kill myself, and so I my goal that night when I went around this island. Now we live on a small island, and it's hard to put 200 miles on your car in one night, but I did, and it was, I wanted to get a DUI. I wanted to crash my car into the Pali, and I wanted to die, and I had started attending these adult children of alcoholics meetings, and yet I wasn't, I wasn't, there or whatever. So I was drinking, I was using, I was driving around the island, and I called the woman who chaired this meeting, and thinking that she would come and rescue me, you know. And for those of you that know, I was in Haleiwa at 10 o'clock at night, and she was in Kailua, and I wanted her to drive and get me. And thank God she had 30 years in AA and 29 years in Al-Anon. And she told me to get to an Al-Anon meeting. And she was, she was right. but she didn't come rescue me. She did calm me down, and I was able to get home that night. Didn't do anything, didn't do any major damage, and got home. And a few weeks later, I showed up at Al-Anon, and Al-Anon is our sister program for families and friends of alcoholics. And I talk about Al-Anon because it's part of my bottom and it's part of my story. And I'm grateful to Al-Anon because what Al-Anon did, which I had this lovely finger that flew around at everybody. I'll go back a minute, and when my family used to get together at Christmas every other year, and every single time we got together, there was one moment where I created a moment of chaos and blew up, and everybody in the family was upset. That happened every time we were together. And I was the one that created that chaos. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as you were doing this, you were doing that, and you were this positive role model, you were this positive thing, and what was I? And I was doing this woe is me thing, like this. And God saw fit to have me join Al-Anon, which lovingly took away this finger of blaming those that had with all the alcohol. Alcohol was a big deal in our family as we grew up. And as I remember one time seeing my dad pour a drink, and as the drink went higher, so did my blood pressure, and that was the way it was at our house. There was drinking. My dad was the happier drunk or happier drinker. My mom was not. She was very stern and serious and not very nice. And she had tongue fu, which she could cut anybody down with her tongue at any time. And so I didn't take people home very often. And that's when I came to Al-Anon, that's what happened. Lovingly, Al-Anon took all of that away. And then it left me with me. And I remember sitting in an Al-Anon meeting, and there were about 50 people there that night. And they were talking about the alcoholic passing out on the floor. And I thought it was hilarious, and I started laughing. And then I looked around, and it was like, one of these things is not like the other. I was the only one laughing in the meeting because, I thought it was funny that this person had fallen down drunk and whatever. Well, because I'm one of us. I'm an alcoholic, but I didn't know it at that time. I did know that I was not like the people in the meeting, and a few other things happened where I went to an AA roundup with Al-Anon participation in in March of 1990. And it was out on the North Shore. And I remember looking around at one point and thinking, everybody here is sober and having a whole hell of a lot of fun. I was like, how do they do this? I mean, I was sober that weekend too, and I was just in awe. And then I listened to the speakers, and I'd been listening all weekend, and I'd been going, and I had one of those, Sunday morning speaker talked about somebody coming over. The story of Bill and Ebby when they're sitting at the kitchen table. Well, this man had the same type of story, except that he had a friend who came over, and they were talking over this little pink table that he had. And he was talking about how one man had helped him see that he was an alcoholic. And I burst into tears after that meeting, ran out of the room. And the only people that followed me were the women in Al-Anon. Were the women in AA. And the women in AA came, and I was crying, and they came and they supported me, and they knew what I didn't know yet. They knew that I was an alcoholic, and they loved me during that time. And during the next few weeks, I kept going to open AA meetings, and and 3 weeks later, I'm driving along after a rough day at work. I worked at a place that was a trade school for low economic youth, and I was out at the school that day, and there were two kids. I say kids; these were young adults that started a fight in my classroom. One was about 6'4", about 300 pounds, lineman for a football team, and the other one was about 5'6", about my height, scrawny little kid, causing, he was the one causing all the trouble, but they decided to pick a fight, and they were going at it, and the only reason they didn't continue on in my classroom is because they respected me, and I thank God for the teaching position that I was in, and that they respected their elders and they didn't continue. But it shook me. It shook me. And I drove home, and I realized on the way home that the only thing I wanted, I needed that drink. And that's when I realized. I remember pulling up in front of this liquor store on right across from Kahala Mall, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it and I'm shaking because I realized, oh God, I'm an alcoholic. I needed that drink, and I didn't drink that night. I didn't go into that liquor store, and I went home, and I went to the. I don't think I threw out my pills that night, but later on I did, and I started my journey, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that's later on. One of my sponsors asked me, what was it like when you came in? I said, I didn't. People say sometimes, I used to interpret this the wrong way. They say, remember your last drunk. I thought they said, remember your last drink. My last drink was 2 beers at my sister's house, and on a Sunday, on Easter Sunday, and it was not scary, So what I remember is, what my sponsor told me to remember is, what was that feeling like when you wanted to come, when you came in? And it was that I was going to be found. The feeling was that I was going to be found dead in in the apartment I lived in. It was going to be 3 days after my death, and I'd be found up in a fetal position, and nobody would care. And the fact of the matter was, I knew that I was going down that road, because on my 30th birthday, I had that one down at the bar. But the second thing was, I had a birthday party down at the beach, and I invited quite a few people. Nobody showed up except for my boyfriend. And I think the only reason he showed up is because he had to drive me there. But nobody, no family, nobody showed up for my birthday. And those, I need to remember those moments when I think that drinking looks really good. That's when I need to keep really, really green. And I've been told to keep my bottom green, and that's what I remember. And it scares the daylights out of me, because I know I can go there. And since I got sober, that was just a gift. I started attending meetings. I attended one meeting a week, one Alcoholics Anonymous meeting a week, and other Al-Anon meetings a week. I chose, my sponsors were Big Book Al-Anons, and this is my story. This is the way I've got to share it. The first sponsor didn't work out as well, but the second sponsor saved my life. And she did not drink, but she was brought through Al-Anon. She was brought in through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she took me through that Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and her sponsor was an active AA. And they walked me through this program one step at a time. They walked me through the surrender and surrendering to my innermost self that I am an alcoholic and that I am an addict. I used to get up in AA meetings and say that I was an addict because I never wanted to be an alcoholic. I didn't want to turn out like my mom. I didn't want to be that bitter. When she drank, she was bitter, and I didn't want to be that way and judgy. And I get bitter and judgy anyway. So right, John, and don't need the alcohol for that part. Anyway, I digress. So I came in, and this woman took me through the steps, and like I said, she took me through step surrender and step 0. Step 1, admitting to my innermost self that I am an alcoholic and that my life was unmanageable. And step 2, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Let me tell you about that part about sanity, being restored to sanity. I decided I wanted to know what I was going to be restored to, because I didn't know that I had, I didn't know that I had ever been sane. So even as a kid, things happened. I don't think I was ever sane. So I went to the bookstore, and I was very comfortable in bookstores. My grandfather owned a bookstore, and I sat down in the middle of the bookstore at that time and threw out 7 dictionaries and opened them all up to the definition of sanity. And what I wanted to know was, is it going to be like a book like this color? Am I going to turn out to be a woman that, that is svelte and, beautiful? What am I going to turn into? And I wanted that definition in the dictionary. Of course, it wasn't there. And what it did say was soundness of mind. And I'm like, what the hell is soundness of mind? And I'm grateful that today that I have found that soundness of mind. She took me through the 3rd step, and I came to know a power greater than myself, and came to turn my will and my life over to this power. This woman didn't believe in the God, didn't believe in church, didn't have that, but she was very, very spiritual. And she gave me what she had. And sometimes she told me, you can believe in the higher power I have. And I did. And that got me through. And then we got to the 4th step. And by the 4th step, I had told her I wanted to drink again. And I was ready to, to throw in the towel. And what she told me was the smartest thing she could say. She said, you've worked your first 3 steps very thoroughly, and you've worked through that. She said, if you want to still drink after step 7, you can drink. And I thought, right on. She gave me permission to drink. But I didn't know what she knew then, was that going through steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, those things would be relieved. Going through step 4, I would go through the whole list of all the harms I had made and the assets that I have. This says that we have a moral inventory. not an immoral inventory. And she kept reminding me of that. I had the privilege of yesterday reminding a newcomer of the same thing. And this is what the gift that gives me. And then as we went on, we went to step 5. And she told me to admit to God, to myself, and to another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. And I was told to read my step to myself, read my step to the, and when I did it to myself, I was told to read it in the mirror and look at my eyes. And I saw the pain that I put myself through in that. And I saw the pain in that little girl that grew up the way that she did. And I saw and then I was to read it to my higher power. And then I was to call her and read it to her. And I did my step that way. And actually, I still do my steps that way. I call my sponsor after I'm done with those first 2 parts. And I love my sponsor dearly to this day. And step 6 took me home. Her alcoholic husband, who had this woman I consider a saint. She lived with a man that was in active alcoholism, that had tried many times to get sober and just was not getting it. But he was the one that turned to me and said, "Go home, go to sit for an hour and go do that." He told me exactly what's here in the big book for step 6, and go home and take that time. And he told me the 7th step prayer. And I did do that. But before I go on, there was one resentment that I was going to take to my grave. And I told my sponsor a little bit. I didn't tell her what the resentment was, but when I was doing the 4th step, I told her that there was one I would not give up. And she directed me to freedom from bondage, and in the big book. And that story helped me to get rid of a resentment that was 25 years old. I had fed it, fawned it, nurtured it. I had made it into a full-grown, mature adult resentment. And it was something that happened when I was a little kid. And because she told me to do that freedom from bondage, and I did the 5th step, I was able to walk through that part and never have that amount of power that resentment had over me as it has since then, as it did before. It still creeps up, but I just know that I've worked my steps on it. Step 7, I humbly asked him to remove the shortcomings that she and I had come across. And we did it together. And she and I walked through and told us what were those shortcomings. And I walked through that. In step 8, it says, in today's daily reflections, it made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them. And it says, on one of the key words in the 8th step is the word all. I am not free to select a few names for the list and to disregard the others. It is a list of all persons I had harmed. I can see immediately that this step entails forgiveness, because if I'm not willing to forgive someone, there is little chance I will place his name on the list. Before I place the name on my list, I said a little prayer. I forgive anyone and everyone who has ever harmed me at any time, in any circumstances. And I did something similar to that when I made my list. And then on step 9, I made amends wherever possible. And And it says in step 9, you know, some of these people had already passed away, but I did the step that I needed to do. I either wrote them a letter, I either prayed, or what I did was change my action and start living the amends, and walked through that. Um, and I'm so grateful. There was the amends I made to my parents. This was a few years later, but they had already started seeing me live the amends that I didn't. At family gatherings, I did not create the havoc that I had done before, but I had made amends to them, and I am forever grateful because of that, because I had a great relationship with my parents, both of them, before they passed. And it's only because of you folks here and because of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so grateful for that part that you gave me back, that I had got to drop that resentment against them, those resentments against them, and walk through one piece at a time. And today, I continue to take a 10-step inventory every day, or most days. Okay, I'll be honest, most days. Um, and I'm really grateful that I have a book that I use that does the 10-step questions, that every day I get asked, you know, where have I been resentful, dishonest, or resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? You know, these are on page 86 of the big book, and it's between steps 10 and 11. And, you know, do I owe an apology? Have I kept a secret to myself that needs sharing? Was I kind and loving towards all? You know, when I answer these questions honestly each day, it keeps me in a better spirit. And I know that I've done the best I can. Sometimes I need to go back and make amends, and I do. And that's because you guys taught me this. Step 11, I do continue to reach out to my higher power, and I'm trying more meditation. That's a step in itself. One of my happy places when I was a kid was the summit of Haleakala on Maui. It's 10,000 feet up, and it is the summit of the crater. It's called the crater on Maui, and it's just this stunning place. And when I think of places I need to be in my head, when I need to have a quiet spot or a happy spot, I have that, or I have the beach that I swim at, that John and I swim at frequently during the week, that we get this 11th step prayer and meditation. People pay thousands of dollars to come here, and we live here and we get to be there in this beautiful ocean that is just stunning. And that doesn't pass me by. I know I'd have that. In step 12, you guys told me I've got to give what was freely given. And I'm grateful that I get to do that. And I only do that one day at a time. You know, I can only give away what was given to me, and I do it a day at a time. And like I said, I talk frequently with a newcomer now. She's been a real blessing in my life this last year. Last year I went through breast cancer, and it was an eye-opening experience. I have a sister that passed away from breast cancer, and that was really scary. When you get the call at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and the doctor says you have cancer, what the hell are you supposed to do with it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday? You know, you can't call the doctor. You can't you know, you can't go through it. That, you know, what you do is you pray and you think, oh God, now I have to tell people. I have to tell my husband I have breast cancer. You know, I have to walk down the stairs and look at this man and tell him, you know, this is it. This is what's going on. And what he reassured me was that we'll take it a day at a time. And that's what I have in friends. I'm sitting here looking at friends that did that for me, that said, Jane, we'll take it a day at a time. You don't know what's coming up. Don't future, just take it a day at a time. And that's the way I've been able to take my recovery. I'm so grateful. Thanks for letting me share. Mahalo.
Thank you, Jane. That was a beautiful share, and I got so much from you that I can't remember what it was, because you know you hit on so much stuff. And there was one thing you said, and I was trying to hold on to it, and I've lost it. But I'm glad I got sober when I did. I'm glad that people came into my life to show me how to get well. I was bullied into the exactly to do how to do it, and I was to go that way. But I needed that. I know some people needed a bit more gentle than that, but I needed somebody to tell me. But I was also promised a life beyond my wildest dreams if I done what I was told. And I've lived that for a long number of years. And my own health has I suppose deteriorated over the last number of years. And there's nothing I can do about it. There's no recovery. I'll be around for another while yet in case anybody's going buying a new shirt. I hope so anyway. But I just love what's been handed out here to us freely. You know, I can't, for the life of me, it's not coming to me. You hit on so much stuff, you know, it just amazes me that we're so far apart and we should never have met, but we got the opportunity to meet and spend a bit of time together. And it's a beautiful thing, this fellowship, the connection we have right around the world. And I'll take it away there, Mick. If I think of it, I'll come back.
Okay, Nossi, thanks very much. My name's Mick and I am an alcoholic by the grace of God. And this fellowship, I don't need to take a drink today. Jane loves your story and everything. Like most of us, you know, I'm a very lucky person, you know. And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought, you know, you were a boring lot of old farts. And look at you, eh? Wonderful people. And I've had the privilege today to be at a AA camp out. And we were in the woods, in the fields to start with. And then we went into the woods to do meditation in an old summer house. And as they started the meditation, there was a slight breeze and the leaves began to rustle in the trees, like if it was the other at the outside was joining in, and it was wonderful, you know, because my God is the great outdoors, the countryside, and I love the countryside. You know, and I'm a very, very lucky person to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, as you said, you know, earlier, you said you can't give what you haven't got. And you people have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You know, you've taught me to love, care, and honor people. And I want to thank you all for that. We've come to the end of the meeting, and Kathy is going to read the promises.
I'm an alcoholic If we are painstaking about the phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank Nick for doing secretary with me, Karen for doing timer. And that's all we've done the service this evening. And who read the preamble?
Marianne.
Marianne, of course. How could I forget Marianne? There you go. And thanks everyone for being here. And a special thanks to Jane for sharing with us this evening. Take it away, Mick.
Right. Reminder, we have a meeting on 7 days a week at 8:30 a.m. UK time. We also have a lunchtime meeting every Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time. That is a meditation meeting.
And Saturdays, of course, we have the old timers meeting, an extended share recorder for the archives. And on Thursday evening, we have a meeting at 7:30 p.m. UK time. We use the same meeting code for all our meetings.
Stick around for fellowship after the meeting. If you want a breakout room after the meeting, please let the hosts know.
And the yellow card, who you see here,
What you hear here,
when you leave here.
let it stay here.
And there you go, folks. That's a wrap, as they say. Jane, would you lead us out with the serenity prayer? And thanks again for your service this evening.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mossy. And Mossy and I got to meet each other in Vancouver, which was just what a cool event. So grateful to meet you and to be a part of this. Let's start with the serenity prayer. Do we do the we version or do we do the regular?
You're the boss.
Let's do the we version. God,
Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to live.
Keep coming back.
Amen. Yay.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.